followed by a splendid dinner in a specially erected marquee to round off a wonderful day. How long ago that seemed, like another world. It was slow to dawn on Betsy, as more slivers of memory intruded. She should not be here in this house, a place she'd been determined to flee. Or was that a dream? Was Edward Brazier, who had promised to come and take her to freedom and much more besides, an illusion? A faint strip of light coming from her brother's study, leaking out from under the door, caught her eye. It needed the support of both her hands on the wainscot to make progress towards it. And once outside, turning the handle also required effort. The catch released. She fell forward, which threw the door open, leaving her hanging onto the brass knob as her knees nearly gave way. A multi-branch candlestick sat on Henry's desk, all the wax stems guttering and not far off vanishing. He was asleep in a chair before the fireplace, his long, spindly legs stretched out, crossed at the feet, shoes almost in the grate, hands folded corpse-like on his chest. There was little but ash now, with the odd faint hint of red, where the last of the embers retained some heat. Hauling herself upright, Betsy made the distance between the door and Henry's huge desk to stand, hands pressed down, wondering at the disorder. Highly unusual for a man so fussy about everything being orderly. There were 2 empty champagne bottles, used glasses, and, once she turned her head, in another chair, the wild pepper and salt hair of the Reverend Joshua Moyle. He lay crowned to one side with tongue lolling out, also sound asleep. Elizabeth? Reacting too speedily to what was an urgent whisper nearly unbalanced her. One hand clutching the edge of the desk was required to stop her from sinking to her knees. Her Aunt Sarah stood in the doorway, looking anxious and making frantic gestures for both silence and that she should come away. Slow-witted, Betsy failed to respond, so her aunt closed the space between them, took her arm and led her back out into the hallway, softly pulling the door shut behind her. "What is happening? I scarce know where I am." "My poor dear," was all Sarah Lovell could say in response, this imparted in a voice full of misery. "I never realized Henry could be so wicked." "Why? What has he done?" "Best sit, Elizabeth," was the reply, as Betsy was eased on to one of the hallway settles. The scream, which rent the air a few minutes later, was enough to wake the dead, if not those too drunk to hear it. It stirred Henry Tulkington, who shuddered slightly at the unpleasant feeling of being chilled. For a moment, he too was left to wonder where he was and why. What did register was the fur on his tongue, as well as the sour taste of stale wine on his breath. Rising, his legs stiff from discomfort until fully erect, he laid his hands on the mantel to stare into the embers as the events of the last few hours came back to him, bringing forth a feeling of satisfaction. The crash of his door being thrown open, so violently it hit the wall, had him spin round. There stood his younger sister, glaring at him, her hands stretched out to hold herself steady on the frame. Even with a slightly woolly head, and knowing he was in for a tongue-lashing, Henry forced himself to smile. "Elizabeth, my dear." "You utter swine!" "What a lack of gratitude. I must profess myself shocked." "I will not let this stand." "Really?